welcome to our weekly Brain Balance live chat with Heather Wells. Heather, how are you today?
I'm good. I just have to call attention to your pretty hair, and I had my cursor on your face, and I'm sorry, I moved it.
Aw, aren't you the sweetest? Thank you. Yes, I did have some self-care time today. So yeah, my hair will not look this good again for a few months. So take it in, people. There it is.
I need mine done. That's another reason for the hat besides the rain.
Good trick. Oof, I need to use that. Today we are going to be talking about something actually that is so relevant in our household, and I'm sure it is for you all at home too. We're talking about impulsivity, and we deal with the struggles of that a lot, Heather. And just in case you guys haven't been with us before, or if you have, I want to let you know that Heather is a therapist. She's a board certified cognitive specialist. She's also the National Autism Summit speaker, and just has a wealth of knowledge that it's her life's mission to help all of us. So thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you, Jen. I love doing these with a parent, a fellow brain balance person, and hi to everyone out there. Thank you for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much. So we're going to be talking impulsivity, and I'm so excited to learn about this because this is actually one of my sweet boy Roger's main struggles, and I have to really remind myself that sometimes he makes choices not because he's trying to make this bad choice. So I'm so excited to learn about this.
Yes, I mean, it can so easily look like it's a willful decision, and it's just not. I'm not saying there are no willful decisions involved, but this is a real issue caused by disconnection in the brain. And of course, it's prevalent in ADHD, especially the hyperactive impulsive type. But I did a show a while back where we talked about how hyperactivity, I think what people tend to think of is the hyperactivity, like they're running around and jumping off the ceiling, and it can be that. But often, even in the little ones, it's emotional hyperarousal. And for some who were physically hyperactive when they were younger, it translates into emotional hyperarousal later. So that is the hyperactivity of emotions. Last week, we talked about regulation and how that is so key behind distractibility and evading discomfort. And there's a lot, you're going to hear some common themes this week, but very directly applied to impulsivity, because this is another regulation issue. So I think, and this applies to all ages too. I mean, some adults still struggle with impulsivity, and that's okay. We've got things for adults and kids today. So Bess, I think we can go ahead and pull up the first slide. And I decided to do a different brain picture today because y'all have seen my one about the amygdala, the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex. Some of the structures you see here are part of our it's called the limbic system. It's the emotional center of the brain. And this does not work the same in individuals struggling with impulsivity. Brain connectivity, when we talk about that, we're talking about those highways of communication. We don't want 2-lane country roads. We like them, but in the brain, we need 8-lane superhighways. So to understand, and y'all have heard me talk about the tie between sensory motor skills and learning and emotions and on in the fight or flight. Look right here. I am showing you the emotional center of the brain. And part of that is the basal ganglia, motor control, motor learning, executive function, same part of the brain. All of those critical thinking skills, the things that give us inhibition so we're not impulsive, problem solving, time management, organization, etc., behavior and emotions, all in the same area. But y'all have heard me talk about sensory motor input coming through the brainstem, and the amygdala is the guard dog. Am I safe? That is a little tiny circle that this artist did not color. But a lot of times the amygdala will tell us we're not safe even when we are because of sensory issues. The thalamus is a sensory relay station to the amygdala and to the prefrontal cortex, where we have all those getting stuff done skills, where we have inhibition. Inhibition is basically the opposite of impulsivity. Let me stop and think before I say or do this. And so the frontal lobe is the security checkpoint. One way to think about it is in individuals who struggle with impulsivity, the gate is kind of broken. The frontal lobe is supposed to manage the emotions, decide what to do. We need to change that lock. It's not working so great. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind, the hippocampus, we've talked about how that is involved in memory and language and how information sometimes doesn't make it there if kids or adults are anxious. But understand too that y'all know that emotions come up when we think about memories, whether they're good or bad. So that memory center is going to impact my emotions. If I'm facing a situation and it triggers me to something traumatic, or it triggers me to the last time I got in trouble again for the millionth time, that is going to impact my behavior. And one way to think about this, if we do not have good communication in the different parts of the brain, you have a traffic jam. And the other thing to keep in mind is who's going to manage their way around that? The fastest car. What's the fastest car? The thing that has my focus right now. I posted something yesterday that it was just a beautiful quote about how my focus of the moment is dictating my life, when the purpose of my life should be dictating my focus of the moment. Part of regulating attention, to take it back to last week and pull it all together here, because most individuals with impulsivity also have some attentional regulation issues. Regulation. If I don't know what to focus on, I'm chasing the wrong target, right? That's distractibility, and it can lead to impulsive behaviors. Impulsive behaviors are not only blurting out something, interrupting, jumping up in class when I'm supposed to be seated still. I mean, it can be compulsive shopping, gambling, and I'm talking about like impulsive behavior is something that it has negative consequences. The other side of the spectrum of that is spontaneity. That's fun. That's cool. But those are things that you make with a peaceful heart. Impulsivity is usually something that is made in emotional hyperarousal state. So it can be kind of the same trait, but it comes up in different ways depending on the emotional state. And really, we're looking at, does it have a negative consequence in your life? Are you buying things that you can't afford to buy? It can be kleptomania. I mean, that's rare, but it can be. It can be eating. It's very tied to anorexia and bulimia. It's very tied to post-traumatic stress disorder. So traumas can bring this up. It is very tied to even invalidation in childhood. And I want to talk about this for a minute, because that invalidation is not in an unloving home necessarily. When we cannot relate to why is our son or daughter so worked up about this, it's not a big deal. We are accidentally invalidating their emotions, and those emotions become bigger. And so there is a lot of research about the link between emotional invalidation. It doesn't mean that we don't do anything with it. You are really stressed. You're really worried about something right now. Tell me what has you feeling that way. And then we're going to talk later about how to teach them to work through it. It doesn't mean that we don't work on emotional regulation and those social emotional skills. But in that moment, it's our job to validate and dig deeper and make them feel okay for feeling that. One of the reasons that kids don't want to talk about it is we have this concept of positive and negative emotions. And that's for a purpose. I mean, fear and caution are called negative emotions, but they serve a purpose. All emotions serve a purpose. But if we might not want to call them negative emotions, we can call them uncomfortable emotions, instead of negative, because then I'm sharing with you something I'm uncomfortable with, not something that's negative, which means I'm negative, which is how they perceive it. But I think this is pretty powerful. People without ADHD or other struggles that impact inhibition can stop midstream if they recognize a person is not smiling. Like they say or do something that was probably inappropriate. The child with ADHD needs 20 to 30 milliseconds longer warning in order to alter their course. And that's an eternity when it comes to behavioral control. 95% of our thoughts are automatic. And then we act on that, right?
Yeah.
20 to 30 milliseconds doesn't sound long, but it is when you're talking about the subconscious mind bombarding you with thoughts that you just act on instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can think about when I'm looking, especially as an actor, I'm reading people's faces constantly
Yes.
to see how they feel, and I respond almost immediately.
Yes. And keep in mind too that we know that a lot of individuals with regulation issues, some of that regulation challenge comes from sensory motor issues. If I don't have good body awareness, I'm going to probably need even longer than 20 to 30 milliseconds more
Yeah,
because I don't feel my body the way I'm supposed to. So I don't pick up on your cues.
yeah.
So that's another thing to keep in mind. But how do we get out of this traffic jam? Work on brain connectivity. I mean, we got to get the brain balanced, do things where they're using both sides of their body, get to the root causes, address that. So, okay, we can move on.
Yes, I was going to say, you're going to be giving us some tips on this. I would imagine it takes a little
Yes,
practice when it doesn't come naturally, right?
it does. So, impulsivity usually happens when I don't think I can handle this. A lot of people, it's because they've given up and they've had so much negative messaging. They have felt invalidated. Some of it's real, some of it is perceived. Remember that 98 to 99% of adolescents and adults with ADHD have rejection sensitivity dysphoria. If they experience real or perceived rejection, it is almost impossible to bear. And they become people pleasers. They opt out. They act impulsively. There's rage and suicidal ideation, all kinds of things that get associated with that. And they have there's quite a filtering system where I forget all of the good that was said to me and remember the one bad comment. But it is really a part of this challenge.
Yep.
So how do we improve emotional regulation after we validate it? Now, we just talked about body awareness. So we do want, if your kids don't feel their bodies the way they're supposed to, they do things where you're putting tension on the muscles, joints, tendons, push-ups, carrying things, lifting, pushing, pulling, dusting, vacuuming, mowing, TheraBands, any of those stretchy bands that you can use for a resistance training workout. You can also tie them around the legs of your desk chair. So if they're kind of kicking and disturbing other students, that's a really good thing to have at school where they can pull on that and it's regulating and growing their body awareness.
That is so smart.
Subtle way to get them regulated, get rid of some of that energy, get out of that restless state. Yeah. Now, you have to have body awareness to do a body map. You've heard me talk about body maps before, but here's an example. And this can be, this says what kinds of things make me feel anxious, but it could be what kinds of things make me feel infuriated, whatever the particular emotion is that you're targeting with your child or with you. This is good for adults too, by the way. Picture might look a little different, but the principle is still good. And they are just, when we get in touch, our body gives us stress signals when we're starting to get stressed or any sort of heightened emotions. Is there a pounding in your chest? Do you get that knot in your stomach?
Tension, I get like pain in the middle of my chest, like real. And the funny thing is, I'll notice like that nothing super stressful is necessarily happening in that moment, but like maybe my daughter won't stop talking. She's just talking a lot and it's overwhelming like me. I start to like hurt in my chest and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, take a breath.
And taking a breath is the perfect thing to do because you are heading toward an anxious mode or fight or flight sometimes, or even if it's not that severe, it's going that direction. That impacts oxygen distribution. And I mean, our brain needs oxygen and blood flow for us to be regulated, for us to make good decisions, for us to learn and focus and regulate all of the things we need to do.
Yep.
And when you take deep breaths with your diaphragm, your stomach should go out, your abdomen, as you're breathing in, and as you breathe out, it goes in. We don't want to breathe from up here. We want to breathe from our stomachs. That is it's not just one of these, old wives' tales, take deep breaths. No, it actually physiologically changes the stress response. But have kids identify, and what you said was so powerful because our body gives us warning signals before the emotions are up to here. And the whole goal, the body is saying, hey, it's starting to escalate. You do a calming technique right then. You don't wait until you feel the emotion to go with it and it gets it back down. You take a little walk, you do deep breaths, you get out in nature and just, what all can I hear for 5 minutes? Whatever the things are that work for you, journal. Just get up and do cardio. I mean, for 60 seconds, that's great for kids anyway.
Yeah.
But that is the power of doing a body map so that they are connecting cognition. Their body is telling them about the emotion that is going to come. If we can catch it before it escalates, they are much less likely to be impulsive or to lash out, emotionally.
Yeah.
So this is just a great example. Sweaty hands, the heart beats fast, butterflies in the tummy, need to go to the bathroom. This is also great for some kids who are having a little more trouble. Maybe at school they have accidents. It might be related to anxiety, and this could also save some embarrassment on that. And what brings it on? So this is really metacognition. I am thinking about my thinking. I'm thinking about my body. What is my body-brain connection? This is powerful. I have seen this keep kids from getting suspended or expelled from schools when I have schools do this with students who are struggling. That's how powerful it is.
Wow.
So teach them calming techniques. And as you do this, try different ones with your kids. For adults, of course, you're going to figure out what works for you. Of course, social connection, talk to a friend, all of those things. But as your kids get to experiment with them, have them start being mindful enough to select the one that works best for them. I know there's a whole lot of talk about mindfulness, and there is a time to be mindless. There is a time to check out and relax, and sometimes a solution to a problem comes up. But in these moments, and when we're talking about impulsivity, be in the moment. And that's also like taking your sensory experience. You're okay with everything that's happening, no judgment on anything else until you calm down, and then you can address the situation in a more well-reasoned manner.
I love that you have like the different options for people, because like I think my tendency is to say, because for me, deep breathing does work. Like if I just breathe, like you said, and I stop, and that does bring me back. But sometimes I'll say, especially to my littlest guy, I'll say, take a deep breath. And he's no, he doesn't want to take a deep breath, So like, I love that you give these different options, because sometimes they do fight you on the one that you give. And I tend to go to the one that works for me. I didn't think of all these other ways.
Another good thing, if you want to give your child a cue until they're ready to pick up on these signals on their own, you notice what these things are and tell a joke or have a silly made up code word that makes them laugh. Laughter diffuses all kinds of things. But we want to work on emotional granularity. That means, y'all have heard me talk before about black and white thinking. Everything's great, everything's horrible. Anything in the realm of mad means I'm infuriated and I act like it's a 10 on a scale of 0 to 10. So start working on, have them identify what the emotion is, and then have them come up with at least 2 more words for the emotion. So if they say, I'm mad, okay, what else can that be called? And then you talk about frustrated and irritated, whatever those words are, and talk about what they mean. Give examples of what makes you feel that way. If they're really young and not ready for really large vocabulary, say, are you really, really mad? Are you just a little mad? Or somewhere in between? You can even do that where they're still starting to see shades and degrees, but then it's really important to layer in other emotions vocabulary, because when you have vocabulary for it, it forms the framework in my mind, and my behavior starts matching it. This situation is really a 4, not an 8. And then replace overwhelming emotions. We are not avoiding them. We've already identified them. We're owning them. We're not judging our emotion. We're not getting in trouble for emotions. So important. That's part of that invalidation. By the way, invalidation is also very strongly linked to adolescents developing borderline personality disorder. We don't want that. But if it is virtually impossible to be truly angry and grateful at the same time. So, having a gratitude practice, we don't tell kids, if we tell kids to say something they're grateful for, they're going to resent it and they're probably not feeling grateful, and then they feel inauthentic. But as you work on, I did a whole gratitude show, and if you're incorporating those things, ask them to come up with a creative idea for the family to do as a gratitude practice. You're so creative, and have them do something for the week that all the family's going to do. And that is just like we can't tell ourselves to not think something by just saying, don't think about it, because then you think about it more. We can't tell ourselves not to feel something, but if we replace it, we've already acknowledged the one that was there. That emotion moves through us because we replace it with something else. Very healthy. One thing I have to say about anger is if you or your kids are angry about something, that is powerful information for parents. When your kids are angry about something, you're finding passion. You're like, my child doesn't care about this. They don't care about that. They do seem apathetic, or so on and so forth. Even if they're manifesting their anger incorrectly, they're passionate about something. Use it. That's giving you important information. So any of these quote unquote negative emotions, I like to call them uncomfortable emotions, have adaptive value. You can do something with them. Here's something that matters, along with the energy to do something about it. So help them identify why they got angry. What was the trigger? How were they feeling before that? What happened? And so forth. And you can turn that into something really powerful for them. Discomfort tolerance. Some impulsivity. I'm going to escape the situation by doing the thing that feels good right now in this moment. Dopamine release, party in my head, and not think about the consequences later. One of the reasons this happens is because we do call them negative emotions, because maybe they have been told to buck up. It's not that big a deal, well-meaning, but it's turns out that's not very helpful. So we don't want to rescue our kids. We've talked before about anxiety. What goes up must come down. If we rescue them, that's how they remember it. And they think, you're right, I couldn't handle it, so my parents had to rescue me. Kids need to know that we all have uncomfortable emotions. Life is hard sometimes. Help them work through it, but don't rescue them. So important. But ways to reduce your emotional vulnerability, and I don't mean in relationships, I mean where you're predisposed to having these emotional hyperarousal states that lead to ill-conceived behaviors. I'm not going to harp on this because everyone, yes, we know, Heather, sleep, diet, exercise, yawn. But that is how you take care of your emotional home, so to speak. Think about if your child comes in like, I wrecked the car. Why? Oh, because I was looking at the back seat at my friend. I mean, you're going to be upset about that? Yes, rightfully so. What's the difference in how you're going to handle it if you got a good night's sleep, if you are eating the right foods, if you have exercised? I couldn't get to the gym, but I went for a walk. I carved out, self-care time. Your response is going to help the situation instead of escalate it. Same thing for our kids. We've talked about gratitude, positive imagery, teaching kids to close their eyes and imagine whatever they like on a mountain, on a beach. Progressive muscle relaxation, such a good technique where you, this is really good if you're having trouble falling asleep too, where you tense up, you start, from your head to your toes or toes to head, where you clench like your toes as tight as you can for a few seconds, and then you let them go. When you let them go, they're going to be more relaxed than they were before, and you work all the way up your body. It's also replacing loops of thoughts with something productive you're doing. So it's kind of a double thing there. Teach kids and model this. Do this for yourselves, parents. Self-compassion, and that's not just self-care. I'm talking about don't beat yourself up. What would you say to your friend who comes to you with the same challenge that you faced? How would you talk to them? Talk to yourself that way. Self-talk is so important. Journaling, there's over 40 years of research on how journaling increases emotional regulation. I wish everybody on the planet would journal because it makes a huge difference.
How often do you journal? Do you journal in the morning?
This is probably a bad answer because I don't have a specific time of day I do because my schedule, but I do it every day, but it absolutely varies depending on my schedule.
Oh, wow. I feel like I have to set like a specific rule for myself of when I'm doing it or I won't do it.
I mean, because I do schedule it in, but where on the schedule it is just varies.
Brilliant.
Yeah. That's how you make sure you do the things that matter the most, is to have them on your schedule and not on a to-do list or just in your mind, having them written down. And this time is blocked off for that. It's usually very early in the morning or very late at night.
Yeah.
All right. We can move on. And so I've already mentioned how thought patterns are 95% subconscious. We are identifying the bodily sensations that preceded this. We are identifying the emotion. We're giving multiple names for it. We're using calming techniques. We're taking care of our emotional house. We also have to be aware of thought patterns. And these are some common thought patterns for the same individuals who have difficulty with regulation and don't have enough highways of communication going through the brains tend to have these types of thought patterns. Beating yourself up over shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have done this. That's a very shaming statement. Or you should have done that. It can even be blaming towards someone else. Fortune telling. I already know how this is going to turn out, so I don't even need to go there. And just that is sort of an opt-out thing. I think the all or nothing is pretty evident. We've talked about that. Mental filtering is I only remember the good and not the bad, or vice versa. But usually it tends to be I only remember the bad, not the good of a situation.
What's funny about this, and you can tell me about this, but my oldest, who is more neurotypical, we went to a place that for me, it was a horrible experience. None of the kids were under control. They were wild. They were crazy. We barely got home. I felt like alive. And she said, well, you know what? That was really great, wasn't it? And I was like, were we at the same place? And she was like, well, I mean, yeah, it was like a little tough, but like, it was great. I was like, you know what? Hold on to that. Keep that, because I don't have that.
We all have a different sensory threshold. It's so interesting.
It really was fascinating. I was like, that was fun for you?
What's energy begetting versus draining? We are so wired differently. It's amazing.
It's wild. Yeah. Anyway, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No. This always happens. You never do this. I never do this. I'm always going to be bad at XYZ. Comparisons. Keep in mind what I said from the perfectionism show, that comparisons look different. Like people who are not struggling with some of these emotional regulation things, if we make a comparison, and I'm not talking about that catty, envious stuff, it's typical on some human level to think, oh, so-and-so has a job very similar to mine. I wonder what they're making. You're not jealous. It's not a competition. Or we started working out at the same time and we're about the same age and putting the same effort into it. What kind of results are you getting? It's not a jealousy thing, but you're comparing like to like. Someone who has shame, who does not have a positive sense of self, who has cognitive inflexibility because of not enough communication, often they tend to compare themselves to the person who's been working out their whole lives and they just started. And now I'm going to beat myself up about it, that kind of thing. So be aware of these thought patterns. Talk about what they mean with your, think about them for yourself if this applies. Talk about what they mean with your kids. And hi, Joshua. Thank you for the question. Part of, as far as dangerous impulse, because yes, these things can be risky. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this topic is, yes, there are inappropriate behaviors. And then there are the ones of, drinking too much, driving recklessly, self-harm, We
even have like a balcony area in our upstairs loft that sometimes we're worried that Raj might either jump over himself or throw his brother over when they're being like rough and playing together, and not with the intention of hurting anybody. Yes. But like we have like a very real fear that he might make that decision without thinking about what might happen.
And that's what impulsivity is it is immediate action without thought. And that is why, and Joshua's question was so well timed. It's like, we planned this. Thank you, Joshua. And because our thoughts happen so automatically, I mean, we don't even know some of the thoughts we're having. And that is why we want to bring our subconscious thoughts into conscious awareness to the level we can. Practice the 6-second pause. So if you are about to do something, pause for 6 seconds and fill your brain with something that is just a logical thing. Like, I'm going to count backwards from 100 by 7. What you're doing is you are getting your mind out of the emotional state and you're getting it into logical, concrete things that are not emotional at all. Now, if math is super frustrating for you, do something different, but how many state capitals can I name? Something mundane. Play a game with yourself that is just using logic, that is not emotional whatsoever. Do that for 6 seconds, and that information that's been hijacked in your emotional brain, now you're in the prefrontal cortex where you have reasoning and problem solving, and you do inhibit the thing you were going to do. We don't stop there. As soon as possible when this happens, and this is even the most important when we're talking about dangerous behavior, right now, what is jumping up in class can become very peer pressure and drugs and alcohol abuse, on and on it goes, suicide, all of these things fall under impulsivity sometimes. Write and review a detailed list of the negative consequences. And what I mean by that is not just, if I do this, I'm going to use an easy example. If I eat this donut, I'm gonna feel like yucky all day. I'm gonna have an energy crash. I'm gonna then not eat for the rest of the day because I'm gonna feel guilty, and then I'm gonna binge eat tonight. If we're talking about jumping in a car when you shouldn't be, you're under an influence or something, write a detailed list of all the possible negative consequences and review that right then and every single day. I recommend, if this is a huge issue for people, to put a reminder on your phone, put it in your schedule when you're going to review it every single day. And that starts replacing that knee-jerk response with logic. This is really important. Call it what it is. Don't sugarcoat what the impulse is.
Do you give like this type of feedback to your child? Like, do this when you're about to make a decision, or do you try to see when they're about to do something impulsive and then be like, stop. Hey, let's do this.
If you already know you have an impulsive child, I would talk to them about this process in advance. And then when it comes, it's not the first time, because they won't be able to process the words you're saying when they're in that moment. I would talk about this process ahead of time. So then next time it happens, they have some awareness of what you're talking about. And the sooner you do it, the better, because you were going to be more keenly in tune with what you were feeling, what triggered it, what happened, what was the preceding event, what was I feeling, what was I thinking. Ask yourself, what triggered this? Be specific. If it's more than one thing, it's more than one thing. Don't come up with just one answer if there's more than one. How will this impact my relationships, my job, my well-being, the well-being of others? How does it keep me from what I want? This is really, this is good for anyone, but for younger kids who might not be quite to the relationships, that there's some egocentrism. There's nothing wrong with this question, but this will really resonate with the younger ones. How does it keep me from what I want? Cue them on the level necessary, but let them fill in as many blanks as possible. If I do this, is this something that can be undone if I change my mind tomorrow? So if it can't, that's an automatic no. If it's a major decision, forget the 6-second pause. Maybe a 24-hour pause or longer, before you make a rash decision. It is about being specific, being honest with yourself, logging details, and it's not a one and done. You review it every day. Whatever particular type of impulsive behavior you have, if you've done something in the past, write down. It's painful, yes, but it will keep you. It's going to rewire your brain, get more self-control. It builds neural pathways by doing this that are the self-control pathways instead of the impulsivity pathways. One good thing to talk to kids about is every time we have a thought, it releases either smiley face chemicals in our brain or frowny face chemicals in our brain. That's what this picture is for. And that's a true story. And so talk about different thoughts. And is that a smiley face thought, or is it changes the chemical structure of our brain? So that's why I had that picture there for the kids.
Yeah, that is so accurate too. And I feel like the more smiley face thoughts that are coming out, the more smiley faces I get. If it goes on a negative spin, it's all.
Yes. And that's such a good point, because one of the reasons I talked about, hey, come up, you're so creative. Think of a gratitude practice we can all do this week as a family. Not only are you getting gratitude going, which vastly enhances positive emotions and well-being, but creativity does too. The broaden and build theory, Barbara Fredrickson, University of North Carolina, brilliant woman, talked about one of the best ways to build resilience to where you can.
Yes,
thank you, Joshua.
Smiley face thoughts. It's so true.
Yes. Thank you, Joshua. But the broad and build theory is one of the ways that we build resilience is to pack in as many positive emotions as we can and positive experiences and creativity. That helps us see the big picture. Positive emotions helps us see the big picture. When we're in a negative mindset, we tend to hone in on a detail of something that we're upset about. And creativity broadens the horizons, and we start seeing pathways around a setback. If we are narrowly focused, I'm running into a dead end and I feel hopeless. There's nothing I can do. That's what leads to a lot of impulsivity. It's hopeless. I can't do this. And so I just check out and go with impulse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and for kids, we can move on to the next slide, but I would just want to say for kids, there are fun ways to work on impulsivity, like play catch with them, but have 2 different colored balls and say, give them instructions like catch the green ball with your right hand, catch the red ball with your left. Give them instructions where they're having to consciously think as they're doing a sensory motor activity, and they can't just reach out and grab the ball with whichever hand. You're working on forget this microphone. Communication in the brain. When you use both sides of the body, you're building neural pathways, and they're having to pause and think before they catch the ball. And y'all saw how directly tied sensory motor skills are to impulsivity. Yeah. Simon Says. They have to pause and wait to see if he said Simon Says. Red light, green light. Talking about too slow, too fast, just right from last week, where we get the different stages that we get in, and where that also helps with that body awareness. I talked about that on the last show, so I'm just touching on that this time. Use the strategy of convenience or inconvenience, depending on how you want to look at it. Okay, last week I talked about opportunity cost and how we may have things we want to do, like I want to read a book, I want to draw a painting, and then it's the weekend, it's like, I'm so tired. And so you pick up your phone and you're mindlessly doing stuff. And the truth is that what you're doing on your phone is not really easier than journaling for a few minutes or whatever it was that you want to do. And then you beat yourself up for not following through on what you want to do. Negative spiral. And where did the weekend go? Make bad habits inconvenient. And this can be impulses or anything you're wanting to replace. If you tend to binge eat, what is an incompatible behavior? Go for a walk. When you start taking care of your body, you are giving yourself very dichotomous messages that I'm going to eat a pack of donuts, then I'm going to go for a walk. It's still better to walk anyway, if you're going to eat the donuts, but it starts feeling untrue. You're not giving yourself the same message, and you're not going to do it in that moment, because instead of doing that, you went for the walk in that moment, and the impulse will probably pass, because the same feel-good chemicals you would have gotten from eating the donuts, you get in a healthy way from the walk. And it's very regulating. Up the physical energy required. So if you're kind of addicted to video games and spending too much time on those, put it out of reach, put it up on the mantle, not sitting on the armrest of the chair you're in, where you have to get up and walk over. Sad but true.
I've been so guilty of that. Like, I will move my plug, and it is so hard to plug it in underneath my bed, but I will crawl underneath that bed just so I can have that phone plugged in right next to my bed.
But create physical distance between you and this thing that is, you're wanting to make the things you're trying to break more inconvenient, and put the things that you want to replace them with accessible. Have your exercise bands out. Put your workout clothes out the night before. The more you do the night before, your gym bag is already packed, you're so much more likely to go to the gym. Delay it or schedule it. If I still want to do this in 10 minutes, I'll let myself do XYZ for this amount of time. But in the meantime, I'm going to do the thing that you need to be doing. And then you might be inclined to keep going because it feels good to be doing the thing that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And no guilt on doing the fun stuff if it's scheduled and that's what you intended to do. Then it's not a distraction, like we mentioned last week.
Yeah.
Raise the cost. You keep not going to the gym, hire a trainer. He's going to charge you whether you show up or not. That's just one example. Hide cues. The Dorito bag isn't sitting out. It's put away. I mean, this is similar to physical energy required, except this really is a sensory of, I don't see it, therefore I don't crave it as much, right?
Yeah.
Prevent it in the first place. Don't buy the Doritos or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
Just what can you do to make it not even accessible in the first place? But it is amazing how much our perception of time and effort influences our decisions. Put the book you want to read right beside you. The remote control is up in a cabinet. You might pick up that book, and then it starts kind of a waterfall of things in the right direction.
Yeah, I was proud of myself this morning. I put my book on my nightstand because you had told us that, and I put my book on my
Look
nightstand.
at you, girl.
I did, and I read my book this morning instead of scrolling on Facebook when my alarm went off, and I had some extra snooze time.
I mean, go, Jim. That's awesome.
Thanks, lady. Thank you.
Well, I think that's it, right?
I think so. Yeah. We've still got all of your beautiful locations. So we want to make sure everybody can get a screenshot of that. If you need to contact any of the locations, get yourself an assessment if you haven't been in before for your child. Heather is so involved in the community. She really, really, truly wants to help. So you can call any of these locations. And that new one at the bottom, the Woodlands, is a brand new location. Any updates on your beautiful space?
Oh, it's getting very busy, and everyone coming in is so excited and wonderful. And like, we've needed something like this for so long. And we are about to roll out the adult program. So we are going to be working with all ages, no longer stopping at around mid-20s. We're going to be working with all ages, and I'm super excited about that.
I love that story. And so make sure also that you are either coming into one of the locations or you're following Heather at the Hidden Churn there. She has tips on there every day and just is continuing to give us her knowledge. Thank you so much, Heather. I can't wait to see you next week. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you so much for tuning in, Joshua. I appreciate you.
Yes. Have a great week, everybody. And are you going to have a show on Thursday?
Yes, Thursday at 3:30 with Dr. Brian. So hope to see you then, and I hope y'all all have an awesome week.
Yes. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.